Hi, it's Tiffany Lorraine, the Resilient Mother, with another episode of the Resilient Mother podcast. Today, we're going to do another episode on mastering your unique resilience. Today's guest is Lauren Rose, and she's got a special story to talk to us about her own unique resilience. Laura Rose, thank you for being here. Please tell us about you.
Hi, sure. I'm 43. I'm married with a 10-year-old daughter, and I'm a disabled woman living with chronic pain and chronic illness.
What kind of chronic pain are you dealing with?
So I've had migraines since I was about 15, but I also have inflammatory arthritis, which is rheumatoid arthritis. I have osteoarthritis, which is degenerative. I have fibromyalgia, degenerative disc disease.
How do you stay resilient dealing with all of those things?
Oh, I haven't always been resilient. A lot of it has to do with just accepting what life has thrown at me, which was completely unexpected. The first couple of years that my body started really betraying me and failing me, I wasn't resilient at all, I don't think. I was grieving the loss of everything that I couldn't do anymore, the loss of my career, the loss of my functionality, the loss of, I felt like my purpose in life and a lot of my identity, because a lot of our identity is placed on what we do as a,
Yes.
as a career. And I didn't have a job anymore. So I spent about 2 years really just in a deep depression, grieving that. And I just decided one day, looking at my daughter, who was, I guess, about 5 or 6 at the time, and realizing I don't want her to grow up and remember me as the mommy who was always in bed, depressed, and in pain all the time. That's not the legacy that I want to leave with her. So I knew I had to do something completely different. So I ended up joining a women's Bible study at my church. We were reading this book called It's Not Supposed to Be This Way, which was perfectly titled for that time of my life. And I just realized that, number one, God could take my broken life and make something completely new and beautiful out of it. And I didn't have to have my life be over. I didn't have to stay in bed in pain and depressed the rest of my life. Something could be different. And two, I had a lady who really encouraged me to practice intentional daily gratitude. And
Mm.
so, every single night, and I do it today too, but every single night, whether I wanted to or not, I would just close my eyes and intentionally be grateful for three different things. And I got to the point where it was starting to change my mindset from all the things I'd lost and all the things I couldn't do anymore to the things that I still had and the things I still could do. For instance, it caused me a lot of pain to walk, but I was grateful that I had legs and I had the ability to walk. And so over time, it really just changed that mindset in me. And I ended up just deciding that I wanted my physical and even emotional pain to have a purpose. So I started a blog and then I started a podcast. And I feel like I'm being much more resilient now because I find joy in what I do. And I feel like I'm helping other people in similar situations. And even though I have to live every day in pretty severe pain, it doesn't control me every day like it did for those 2 years. I'm more in control of my life. My mindset has changed. I'm much more positive about, myself and my life and where things could go from here.
That's a great story and a great example of what the power of mindset. Just having a resilient mindset can really shift things around. And I love that practice of gratitude. I think that's also underestimated at what that can do because it starts to make you not take things for granted and to count what you do have to work with, what you do have control of, as you put it. And we really only have control of two things: ourselves and what we're going to do in this moment. And every day we're creating that life and we're either moving towards it or we're staying where we're at. But I love your example because I think some people would just sit there and go, well, I'm just this way. This is the way I am. This is what it is. And I love any story of transformation where someone realizes, no, I want more and I'm going to go find it and I'm going to find a way. And I think you're a great example of that. And I really think that's true resilience. You found a new truth, a higher self to be in touch with and found a way to serve with it as well, which is really admirable. What are some techniques that you use, and what do you share with those that you work with that you find are the most effective besides the gratitude practice, which you mentioned? What are some other favorite things that you do?
So, one thing that I like to do again with mindset is rename the sensations I'm having in my body. So
Mm,
instead of it's hard to do. It's definitely a practice. But instead of saying I'm having stabbing pain in my left hip, I try to reframe it and think, okay, I've got a sensation that I don't like in my left hip. It's not as comfortable as I like. So instead of labeling it, because with labels come judgment. And
mhm.
if I'm judging my sensations, they're going to hurt even more. So that's one thing. Just saying things like, instead of I've got a burning sensation, oh, that sensation is not as cool as I'd like it to be, or it's not as comfortable as I'd like it to be, or not as my muscles aren't as loose as I'd like them to be. And just in doing that, it helps kind of take away from the negativity and the pessimistic framework that we've got around pain. So that's a big one. I also do a lot of grounding work because I've got pretty bad anxiety, and a lot of people with chronic pain also have anxiety because with chronic pain comes a lack of control. And so we often feel like we're just constantly in fight or flight, and our bodies are frequently in fight or flight, which can contribute to a lot of chronic pain as well. And so I like to just ground myself. If I can't sleep at night, for instance, or if I'm just my brain is going haywire, I use my senses and I just focus on five things that I can feel, or five things that I can see, or five things that I can hear. And that really brings me back to the present moment. And in doing that, kind of takes away the fear of whatever pain and anxiety afraid of. So if I'm having a lot of pain, I'll do grounding work, because if I'm having a lot of pain, I'm afraid, oh, this pain is never going to go away. It's never going to get better. The rest of my day is going to be filled with pain. So if I can kind of minimize all of those fears by focusing on the present, it really helps.
I think that also attributes to the way we deal with emotions as well. When we have an emotion, we can have a negative emotion and then think, oh, I feel bad, therefore I am bad, or I'm in pain, therefore I am pain, kind of a similar
Oh, yeah.
parallel there. And it's really important to separate ourselves from it and to relabel it or to see its purpose. I love how you talked about recognizing that you were in a grief process. Without that level of awareness, you didn't know that you needed to grieve. Without acknowledging the pain, it's just going to get worse. It's not something that you can make go away, but you can redefine it and you can decide what you're going to do with it. I'm curious because you mentioned your daughter. Has she taken on any of your practices that she now sees you do just naturally from your example?
She does some intentional breathing sometimes, but I do most of these things kind of on my own while she's at school or while she's doing other things. If she's at home, I'm usually focused on just spending time with her or taking care of her needs. So I usually do these things on my own, but I probably do need to teach them to her because she's got a lot of headaches and a lot of like tummy pain. So that's a really good point. I probably need to teach her some of these things that I do.
That's important to me. And as I coach other people, I feel like I have to practice what I preach. But I also love when my kids happen to see what I'm doing and they catch on to those habits, or they hear something on one of these podcasts or for someone I'm talking to and it resonates with them. I think they are little sponges, and to take advantage of their developing brains at a young age is really important for what's developmentally appropriate as it is. But she's probably observing more than you know, but may not be exhibiting yet. That's what I've noticed is things I thought my kids weren't paying attention to. I found out later they actually were. They just may not have decided to show it yet, but it comes up. So I think you're doing a great job as being an example. And that's being a resilient mother, right? That's our role is we want to create the next resilient generation. We want our kids to have better than we did and a better skill set than we had so that they can be successful at a higher level than even we were. That would be the greatest joy. You mentioned joy earlier. So I think people struggle with this sometimes. They see somebody happy and they're like, where did you get that? Or they see someone being joyful and they're like, how can you be joyful? Like, can you explain how you bring joy into your day and how you recognize the things that would do that for you?
Yeah, so one of the things I try to do every day is something that I do enjoy. So whether that's, doing my podcast or reading a book, or I just started this morning doing, trying to do some Pilates. I say trying because it's not as easy as it looks for sure.
Yeah.
And so for me, doing something or journaling or taking a walk, something to take care of myself is one way to make sure that I am not being overwhelmed by life or by motherhood, and that I'm understanding that I'm an important person that needs to be taken care of. So for me, the biggest joy I have besides being a mother is just knowing that there are people listening to my podcast that need to hear what I have to say, and that continually, log on and click those links and listen and are getting something out of it. Because I love helping people. That's just one of my natural gifts. And knowing that I am doing that is just incredibly meaningful to me.
What started the podcast for you? Where did that idea come from?
Well, it started as a blog when I decided I wanted to help other people. I wanted my pain to have purpose. I refused to believe that I'm going through this for no reason, that God put this in my life for nothing. I'm not ready to accept that or believe that. But then, I had a friend who is doing a podcast about women empowerment. And I was just thinking, podcasts are really popular these days. I listen to several myself. And I talked to her one day and I said, I'm just not sure because I'm an introvert and I don't know if I'm going to be that great at speaking. And plus, there are just so many podcasts out there, and I had all these reasons why I shouldn't do it. And I said, besides, I don't want to be competing with you as a podcast host. And she said, Lauren, I don't care if you write a book or do a podcast or do a blog or whatever it is. She's like, do it all. Put as much good into the world as you can. And that's what I decided to do. So whether one person reads my blog and listens to my podcast or whether 10,000 people do, it doesn't really matter to me. I don't even keep track of my metrics. I like seeing how many countries I'm, available in and be listened to in, because I like knowing just the reach. I think that's really cool. Just the power of technology these days. But I don't typically look at my listen stats because that's not what's important to me. It's important to me that I'm delivering value to people. And if I weren't, I assume that they would stop listening.
I love that you touch on a point. I think part of being resilient is realizing everyone has value because everyone is unique. And as we're talking about unique resilience today, you're facing different things than I've ever faced in my life before. So that makes your story unique. It also makes it valuable. And what you're doing is about touching the one. There's one person out there that is also suffering with chronic pain who needs that encouragement, that may have had that come to Jesus moment, as you talked about, but they're not sure how. And they can take you and bridge that gap and get there faster and have tool sets that they know work, or at least that they can try until they find what uniquely works for them. I think that's the other key, is just to find the podcast that resonates with you, find the mentor who resonates with you, find the counselor that you can work with, or the coach, or the person that inspires you. And that's part of finding the joy as well. What lights you up? What works you towards who you want to become and how you want to manage things instead of letting life manage you. And I love that your podcast is reaching a worldwide audience. I think there's many that can relate to the struggles that you have, and that you've had the courage to step up and to speak and to share your message. If you could encourage anyone that is at the beginning of your journey, that is discouraged or having a hard time, we have a lot of that in the world today, what would you say to them?
So similar to just being, resilient, I don't believe that our circumstances control our attitudes or our destiny. We do. So we don't have to let whatever's going on in our lives control how we feel about ourselves or how we feel about the world or our
I
lives. And
lost you for about 5 seconds there. So if you could just restart from the question.
sure. So I don't believe that our circumstances control our attitudes or our destiny. We do. I don't think that whatever's going on in our lives needs to control how we feel about ourselves or how we feel about the world, how we feel about our lives. And it certainly doesn't control our outcome and where we end up in life. We control all of that. So it's just, a mindset shift to, instead of being a victim of our circumstances, to be empowered and be proactive and do something different if you want something different in your life.
So in the end, you're glad you challenged yourself to be the podcast,
Um,
be a podcaster, to be the host, to do it, because once you accomplish that, that had to build a lot of confidence and a lot of validation that your message matters and that it was the right thing to do when you trusted your intuition.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not easy sometimes because, like I said, I'm an introvert. So speaking and interviewing people, those things do not come naturally to me. But I'm glad that I took that step because it just makes me feel really happy inside to be doing something meaningful for other people.
And do you think people on the journey that you're on could also find their thing? Maybe it's not podcasting, maybe it's writing, maybe it's something else. That the idea is that if they challenge themselves when they rise to the occasion, they'll know that it was worth the effort.
Sure, it could be, blogging or journaling or art or music or anything. Absolutely.
And what things do you do as a daily practice? You talked about gratitude and different things. It sounds like you have a lot of tools that you use. Do you have a way you use them as a daily routine, or do you just have like a resource toolkit of things? And depending on the day, what's going on, you know which one you need, or do you have more of a system or strategy for that?
Yeah, I'd like to have more of a routine about them. Now that my daughter's back in school, I think I can. Back over the summer, just every day was just
Yeah.
chaotic. You never knew what minute was gonna,
Summer
when
with
she
kids.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think what I'm gonna do now is make it more of a routine. So I'm gonna have different things in my routine. Like I have to pace myself when I clean the house. So I do one room each day is my plan. And so I think I'm going to set aside time each morning to do that. So I'm going to set aside each time in the morning to do some Pilates or some yoga, to do some cleaning, some resting. And then while I'm resting is usually when I'm doing the meditation or the mindfulness or the reframing. I have to do a lot of resting. So there's plenty of time for that. But generally, over the summer, especially, it's really just been a resource that I go to when I need to.
Yeah, kids are spontaneous, especially in the summer,
Yeah.
so it's good to have things that you can do quickly. I think that's the other thing sometimes, we as mothers get caught up in is, "Oh, it's gonna take too much time to take that time for myself," or, "It's gonna take too much time to meditate." But really, it can be done in small increments, correct?
Absolutely. I do some of it while I take a shower because that's the one time I actually get some time alone where I'm probably not going to be interrupted.
Right?
So yeah, I use times like that to do some of my mindfulness and my prayer time and my gratitude time.
With your podcast, do you do guests, or is it mainly you talking?
So it's actually mainly guests. I have a few episodes where I'm on, but I have guests with chronic pain. I have guests who help people with chronic pain. I have parenting experts. I have just some kind of random life experts that come on and talk about things that I think are interesting. Originally, it was just going to be me. It was going to be a limited 2 season, probably 6 to 8 episode per season podcast. But then I just got on some forums and I found all these guests who wanted to be part of it, and so it's transitioned into really being mainly guests.
Have you had a favorite guest on your podcast that you would say is an example of resilience or had a unique take on things?
One of my favorites was in one of my earlier episodes. Her name is Ashley, and she healed 12 years of debilitating chronic back pain on her own, just with meditation and mindfulness and inner child work and mind body connection work. And she is absolutely thriving now. So that's just inspiration that a lot of our physical pain can come from emotional pain. um,
Mm.
there's a book called A Day Without Pain, and he speculates that 80% of our physical pain is related to unprocessed emotional pain. And so she was just a great example of that and how chronic pain doesn't necessarily have to last forever.
Oh, I can see why that resonated with you so much. Did you try some of her techniques, and did you find they worked for you as well?
I'm starting to. just a lot of it is the mindfulness that she was talking about, and the mind body connection in The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, which is a really popular trauma book. He talks a lot about how, trauma and emotions get trapped in our bodies, and the it's not always just talk therapy that's the best way to get this trauma out of our bodies. It is a mind body connection, because when we've had trauma, our amygdala is just in fight or flight all the time. And a
Mhm.
lot of times with chronic pain, our nervous system is in this fight or flight mode all the time. And that's why we have chronic pain. Our brain is just over processing these pain signals. And so things are more painful than they are supposed to be, quote unquote.
Yeah. I have chronic PTSD myself, so I'm doing
Mhm.
EMDR work for that very purpose of to calm the nervous system on the things that get triggered and taking ownership of my own triggers. So it's kind of more of an emotional thing, but some of that emotional pain is very painful, but not to the same physical sensation that I'm sure you experience. Do you have trauma in your past or things that you think are contributing to your ailments, or do you think it's genetic disposition? I think that's a conversation people have with chronic pain, is how much of it is life experience and how much of it was passed on.
Yeah, and that's a hard one. So I was adopted. So I did find my birth mom in 2020. So I know a little bit about her side. I don't know anything about my dad's side. So, genetically, I don't know a lot. However, I do have a lot of trauma in my past. I've experienced multiple kinds of abuse and assault, and I was raped when I was 19. So um, I do question how much of my physical pain is from a lot of this unprocessed trauma, because when each incident of my trauma was over, I didn't get help, I didn't tell people, I just thought, it's over, I'm just going to live my life now, it's
Mm.
done, it's not going to affect me anymore. And as I started getting older, I realized it absolutely was affecting me. And so I'm also doing EMDR. So I've got a regular therapist and I've got a trauma therapist, and we're, doing EMDR, and she's helping me a lot, with some of this trauma as well.
I love what you said because I really believe the body doesn't lie and it catches up to us eventually. And there was a lot of shame and around getting help in the day. I think we're getting a lot better about recognizing that some of these things are not things you just have to put up with. And also that mental health issues are not the person. They are not the bipolar. They are not the PTSD. They are not the chronic pain in your example. It's like if someone had a broken arm, we wouldn't call them broken arm, but if someone's dealing with a mental issue or chronic pain issue, somehow we label them differently. But the
Mhm.
truth is, there are options to heal, there are options to get better. It's just a matter of being proactive and finding what works for you. But it is a lot of deep work. And I think that deep work scares some people. But I think that one thing that COVID did for us as a blessing is a lot of us had to sit with ourselves for the first time in a really long time, perhaps, or maybe ever in some cases, and really face some of those inner things that maybe our life was too busy or we weren't dealing with. I think a lot of us had to face it then. So I think people can appreciate more of where you're coming from. But also, it's more common than people realize. We all have trauma at this point with things going on in the world and the way family structures are not holding together, and just our culture of kind of changing whims of standards and what we do and different things. But we can overcome all of these things. Every individual has the opportunity to take control, take their power back, and decide what they're going to do to move forward. Now, I think though it's a process, like you're saying, you're still in the process. I'm still in the process. And sometimes it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. And sometimes you hit points that really bring you down because they are really deep, but you got to another layer that was deeper that you need to get to, and that it can affect you differently. So I think sometimes people get discouraged because they don't realize they are making progress. Like it doesn't feel like it because they're expecting to arrive at some point where it's all resolved. And it's better, I would say, but not everything is completely resolved. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes trying different things because everyone is unique. And that's one thing I love about coaching, is to give people options and let them find what works for them. And do you find that as well?
Yeah, so I don't do coaching. I just do my podcast, and I have a workbook actually on how your emotions relate to your chronic pain. But I do believe that everybody's different. And that's why at the end of every podcast, I ask for some kind of advice from my guest. Like, what advice would you give someone who's living with chronic pain or something like that, so that my listeners can try different things? Because,
Absolutely.
yeah, the same techniques aren't going to work on everybody.
And that's what I like about this podcast. The idea of the Resilient Mother podcast is that any mother can be resilient, no matter what circumstances they're in. We need to support mothers and give them the opportunity to develop their resilience. And I love that you're a great example of that from a chronic pain point of view, but also just your mindset and attitude and the way you're contributing in the world. Like, I think moms get caught up in their role as mom and lose a little bit of sense of self because we just dive into our children. We pour into them and we give to them. But there's things you hit on that are really important. We have to find what fulfills us, what fills us up, what brings us joy so that we have that capacity to give to our children. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. And a lot of it, like you were saying, has to do with identity, because there are a lot of days that I have felt like I am my chronic pain, or all I am is a mother. And one of the things that I was grieving in those 2 years was my sense of purpose.
Mm.
And, I thought my purpose in life was to have this career and, be a wife and a mom. And then when I didn't have the career, and I couldn't really even be a great wife and a mom because of my chronic pain, I didn't think I had a purpose in life anymore. So I really did lose myself in the identity of being my pain. And it's so easy, like you're saying, as a mom, just to get completely immersed in that role. Like I think I'm very immersed in that role right now, since I don't have really anything else except maybe my podcast and my blog taking up my time. um, my Being a mom is frequently my identity, but I've got to remember that she's not going to live with us forever, even though I kind of want her to. And so I don't want to get to that point where she goes off to live her independent life and I am completely devastated because I don't know who I am. I mean, I
Yes.
think that would be a terrible outcome in these next several years of her life. So I do work on, finding myself and knowing myself and bringing myself joy. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing the podcast, is to give myself a purpose in life besides just being a mom.
I love what you're talking about because you're finding your truth in who you are, and then you're doing the things that align with it. And the work that I do is about resilient transformations to live your truth. And because when people live their truth, they light up. You can see a glow to them. You can see the joy, and it's contagious and it passes on and gives other people permission to do the same. And so I love that you found what lights you up and what works for you and lets you contribute at the level that you want to, but also has given you that sense of identity outside of mom, because she'll need that too someday. That example of, okay, yes, you'll be mom someday, but what else? What else do you want to be? What career do you want to have? What hobbies do you have? What's your truth? What is your gifts to bring to the world, and enhancing that? And I think that's a great gift we can give our children, is really giving them ownership of who they are and honoring their truth and helping them be supported in developing those skills and those talents that let them be in the same position of finding the best way they get to serve and contribute in the world.
Yeah, that is a great point, because I don't want my daughter to grow up and just think she's just a mom, or if she has pain, that she's just that pain. I want her to be a whole and fulfilled person, and I want to be an example of that. That's absolutely a great point.
Do you think there's a book for you in the future? It sounds like you kind of have a foundation for that.
I have thought about it. I kind of have an outline. I just haven't started writing it yet.
Besides a workbook, what other resources do you have for people?
So I have a freebie on my website called 30 Ways to Relieve Pain Without Taking a Pill. So that's just at ithurtstomom.com.
That's awesome. I love that. And then there's the workbook. And then if people want to be a guest on your podcast, do they just contact you, or?
Yeah, I would love for people to contact me. It's ithurtstomom@gmail.com. And my podcast is on Spotify and Apple and all of the major platforms.
Awesome. Well, I think we had a great discussion here. I'm excited to have this episode out for those that can relate to your story and maybe suffering from chronic pain, or just may have something in their life that they didn't expect. As the book that you mentioned, like it wasn't supposed to be like this. I can relate to that, as I never pictured being a single mom. A divorced single mom. That was not in my plan, but what am I going to do about it? And I love that you took the opportunity to not play the victim and be a victor, and take a hold of your story and take back hold of the pen and realize you're the author and you're the one writing it, and you get to decide what the outcome is. And I think there's many moms that will find this relevant and they'll be able to relate to it. So thank you for your time today. Please reach out to Lauren Rose if you want to work with her, and you can reach out to me. All the links will be below here. And thank you for listening to another episode of the Resilient Mother podcast, and we'll see you next time.